Come on in, come on in. We are so excited to be here. I'm excited to be here to have an incredibly, hopefully engaging and impactful conversation built on strategy, connection, really centered around nurturing the growth and inclusion of our Black and Afro Latino ERGs. But before we hop into that, I don't want to get ahead of myself. My name is Adonis. My pronouns are he, him. I currently sit at Accenture as a North American diversity recruiting leader. I specifically focus on women's initiatives, persons with disabilities, and our Pride community, but put in kind of exponential effort into intersectionality. So partnering with ethnicity and our other parameters, diversity, partnering internally as well within North America. But my journey of inclusion and my journey of diversity goes back almost 30 years, like to when I was born. And sitting in that identity, coming into this world and really growing up in this space, understanding that we're going to face some barriers, right? We're going to face some challenges. I come from a family that's rooted in reality and rooted in the fact that you're going to go through some things to get to the other side of through. But how do we prepare ourselves? How do we prepare each other with a toolkit of resources to be successful? That followed me through my journey within the collegiate structure, right? Going to school, lack of resources, lack of representation, and creating spaces where they weren't initially at. And that kind of follows you into your career, which we'll talk about here in a second. Followed me into my career of sales and marketing and analytics, working within the sales region, but really moving in later on in my career into HR and recruiting, owning those programs, partnering internally, showing that representation, finding the business case for diversity, and ultimately led to me being able to lead North American diversity strategy for a few Fortune 500 companies and helping us anchor towards not just filling the recruitment pipeline, but creating a sense of belonging. And I'm incredibly excited that I'm not in this conversation alone, that I'm here with my fast friend, Mia. So Mia, I want to turn it over to you to give an intro of your incredible work and a little bit about your background, and then we'll take the conversation in a little bit of a different direction. So over to you.
Thank you, Adonis. I am excited about being here. So my name is Mia Haynes, or Miagra Haynes, and my pronouns are she, her. I have a background in human capital, diversity and inclusion, organizational development. And like you, my diversity journey began way past 15 years ago. I knew what it was like to be voiceless and unseen. And every duty that I had, I made sure I had a DEI lens with it before DEI was the end thing, right? We had affirmative action. So I came from the federal government all the way up to the intelligence community. And I left there and went to the private industry, where I am currently the employee resource group manager at Flagstar Bank. And I oversee 12 of our ERGs and 6 of our DEI committees nationwide, in addition to our executive sponsor committees, and working with our various stakeholders to ensure that we have an inclusive environment. This is a passion of mine. I love it. I love working with companies, with their employees, to make sure that we make that impact across the board.
Absolutely. Mia, do you sleep? It's a sleep process.
I try, right? I just said it's a leap year, but where is the leap?
That part.
I'm not seeing it yet.
That part. This actually segues perfect into the conversation here, because within the confines of what you do day to day, as well as our commitment to diversity, there has to be a commitment there, right? And what I have found in my experience is that where folks hit a roadblock is strategy building and initiatives and buy-in, and actually leveraging the voice of the people, right, to help build those strategies. So to flip that into the question, can you maybe talk through some strategies or some initiatives that you have found to be most effective when you are engaging your population, your employees, and amplifying their voices, their needs, and hearing their value?
Absolutely. So you always have to see the numbers. Who is your workforce? Look at your qualitative and quantitative data, right? So it's okay to understand, okay, the demographic of your workforce, but are you looking at that worker diversity? Where in the different departments of your organization do you may see more Black people in that department, or more Indian people in that department? How are you all tracking that? And then looking at your qualitative, looking at your the quantitative analysis to say, okay, well, we have this amount of people in this location, but now let's hear what they're saying. That's where your qualitative will come in. What's the feedback that we're giving? Let's be transparent. This is going to be opportunity for the companies to be humble, right? They have to hear the raw feedback from your workforce because that's only going to help you along the way. So what is your workforce saying? Are they liking the DEI strategy? Or if you don't have a DEI strategy, what would they like to see? And that can be your starting point. Also, you want to make sure that you're personable. Is your company having town halls? Are they engaging their workforce? Are they speaking to you? If they're speaking to you, are they making sure that it's a dialogue? You don't want to be in a meeting and you hear, oh, our company did this, and you weren't in the know. So that goes a long way for employees as well. And then having professional development programs, right? So you want to make sure you see diversity in your executive and senior leadership positions. So what are you all doing to develop your employees in order to get to that point in their career? It's okay to say, okay, we have these opportunities, but if you have not equipped them with the resources and tools to be successful in that role, it's going to go mute. So you want to make sure that you're investing within before you branch out and do external recruitment for that role.
I love that. And I want to double click on some of the words that you said here, Mia. So I'm writing down feedback, right? I'm writing down transparency. I'm writing down development. I'm inferring buy-in, right? One thing that we find important in my entire career to that feedback point is simply asking the population what it is that they need. And that could be on multiple different levels. What I don't enjoy is building out a strategy that's not rooted in research, right? So going to your population, having those focus groups, having that conversation to say, what would be beneficial? Is it career journey? Is it learning and development? Is it buy-in? Is it representation, as you kind of spoke through before? And then taking that foundational information, that incubator of information that you have to help build out strategy. So your strategy first should start with research, right? Would you agree with that? And you mentioned the quantitative and qualitative, data. Would you agree that that is a foundational pivotal point to building strategy?
Exactly, it is, because how can you know where to go if you don't know who makes up your workforce, right? If you have 90% of white males in your workforce, which I know is extreme, everyone, but let's just give an example. If you have 90% of white males, how are you going to discuss DEI strategy with a population where it may not have directly hit them home? Hit them at home. Now, mind you, we appreciate our allies, right? You look at the civil rights movement. We had allies. We had, them marching with Dr. King, in Selma. We saw that. So we definitely appreciate our allies. But you also want to have a workforce that has a variety, has a diverse workforce that looks different. Not only physically, externally, but you want to make sure that you have a diverse perspective. And a lot of times when you have external diverse workforce, you can hear their walk of life. You can see the different perspectives they bring into your organization, which will help you with not only just enhancing your organization, not just internally, but your customers will see that as well. They'll see how you build that culture internally, and that will make them gravitate towards you.
That business benefit always come through. There is a top line, bottom line benefit to engaging these populations, our populations, our people within these firms. So I appreciate that. I want to take a couple of steps back. I mentioned I've been on this diversity journey for about 30 years since I've been on the planet. You mentioned that from your professional journey, it goes back about 15 years. But to do this work, it takes an attachment, right? It takes seeing yourself in the process, whether that's been positive or constructive, whether it's been good or you've gone through things. And so I want to go back to your personal journey, Mia, and talk about your personal experience, maybe share a few or one personal experience that you had that really shaped your approach to diversity and shaped how you approach diversity today.
Yes, definitely. Diversity is a passion of mine. My background has definitely contributed to the passion, the fight that I have for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know what it's like to be unseen and voiceless, right? And I never wanted anyone to feel how I felt. And when I was going through that journey with a company that I worked for, yes, I had a union rep, but I did all the work. I advocated for myself. My mother always told me that your most powerful weapon is a pen, and you always keep a paper trail. And so utilizing those tools and resources that my mother instilled in me, I advocated for myself. During that journey, I was wrongfully terminated because of the color of my skin, but I fought for my career and I was reinstated, which made me the first employee in almost 15 years to be reinstated on a mediation level. And when I came back, the organization said, we want you to join us on this side of the table. So I went from being on the other side of the table, fighting for my career, for them saying, we need you to join us because we have an issue at this organization. We don't know how to fix it. And so that taught me that it's okay. You just can't be disgruntled. It's not okay just to be disgruntled. If you can't beat them, join them. Right. And so you can't argue and be upset about something that has taken place in your life without contributing to the change, so that the person behind you doesn't have to endure what you endure. Right. And so up until that time, I always said, what is the purpose of my life? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Right. I'm like, God, what do you have me on this planet for? Thought I wanted to be a lawyer. If you look at my resume, up until grad school, my whole resume, law enforcement, law offices, because I just thought that's what I wanted to do. And my mentor said, you make more of an impact outside the courtroom than in the courtroom. And so that stuck with me. And when I went through what I went through at that organization, I said, this is my purpose. And so I've worked with organizations, because I always say you have to be proactive and not reactive. Right. And so you don't want to see a complaint. You don't want a lawsuit to happen against your organization, where you can do things to mitigate that, to work with your employees so they can feel appreciated. And that's what I've done. Not only do I work with our employees, I work from all ranges of the employment level, from the mid to the senior to entry level, because I want to hear from them. I want to socialize with you and hear your feedback. Then I go to the powers that be. Okay, who are the persons that can make things happen, that can implement these changes? And I say, look at your retention rate. It's okay to bring on employees. It's okay to have hiring practices, and you say we were able to, bring in such and such numbers. But what's the retention? Do you have a high turnover? Because you can bring them you can get them through the door, but are you going to keep them? And that's where it comes to feeling appreciated. So me having to go through that walk of life, I've always said, in certain positions, you have to understand what it's like to be in that seat if you're going to fight for that. I like to give an example of, helping the homeless. A lot of times, unless you've been through that journey, not to say you don't have a passion, because again, there goes our allies, right? We need them. But also you have a different perspective when you've sat in that seat, when you walked in those shoes. When you're fighting for diversity, equity, and inclusion, yes, you may have a passion for it. I not only have a passion, I have a love, but I have understanding for it because I walked that journey. I know what it's like to be in that seat. And I just never wanted anybody to go through that.
Mia, we are Wonder Twins in the starting with law, understanding that there's much more for us individually impact that we can provide. And I love that you have a personal attachment to it. I have a little bit of a kind of a hanger question on that. Oftentimes when we're talking about engaging our diverse populations, if we hit a wall or get a no or get pushback, we stop. And in our journeys, as we shared with each other, we face pushback and experiences and things that would tell us to stop. So what kept you going, and what could we encourage the audience to keep them going when you do get a no, right? Or when you do fail at something or you get pushback, when we're talking about engaging the population? Because oftentimes that engagement becomes hard when we do hit that wall, because then we start to retreat. So in your experiences that you shared, what is that fire and what is that continuous thing to say, I gotta know, I hit a roadblock, but this is and this and?
Yes. So what does a house have? A house has doors, a house has windows. Maybe if you close that front door, I'm going into the window.
Hello?
Or I'm going through the back door. Okay. And I'm going to try and find a different way to get a yes. It may not be a yes now, but it may be a yes down the road. And so what I've done is I would do that data. That's where it comes to that quantitative analysis. Okay, what are we looking at? And what are our employees saying? So I've done focus groups with our employees. I said, and what I did was I would meet with the C-suite, and I would go to them and I say, this is what your employees are saying about you. This is what your employees are saying about the organization. And what I did, I took it a step further. Sometimes if I go in these meetings, I'm bringing about 2 or 3 of those employees with me, because now they're not just a name on a piece of paper. I want you to hear from them. I want you to hear what they're dealing with in the trenches when they're in the lower level employees. Oftentimes when people get to a certain level, they lose sight of what the mid to lower level employees have to endure. And you have to hear it. But oftentimes these mid to lower level employees don't trust you. They don't feel comfortable. That's where I come in. I've had the opportunity to be on both sides of the table. And I'm able to come in and bring that perspective to leadership. So when I get a no, which I have gotten no's, I mean, you don't know me yet, but I'm very persistent, right? I've been given no's throughout my career, but when I brought those numbers to them, right? Because you have to have that business case. What are they saying? How is this going to make the company money? Let's be realistic. At the end of the day, how is it going to make them money? But when you're hearing from your employees and then you look at the numbers of your turnover rate, then it makes you go a step back and say, I'm spending more money training new employees when it's just cheaper to keep them than to lose them.
Mm-hmm.
So how about you invest within and hear what they're saying to you? But you also have employees that may fear retaliation, fear reprisal, right? So you want to make sure that they feel safe and secure of disclosing what they're enduring within the organization.
Absolutely. I'm pulling out themes, and you all throughout our conversation as we transition through questions, I just want to name some themes that we have. So when we talk about engaging, it becomes an ecosystem of themes, an ecosystem of strategy. And so some things that you mentioned, resilience, right? Not taking no at face value when it comes to building that strategy. We talk about intention, leading and moving and connecting with intention. So the foundation of our strategy, the why behind why we do what we do, that intention. We talk about ecosystem. That's incredibly important. Building an internal ecosystem that is rooted in trust. And that's trust on all levels, which I think is incredibly important. You talk about analysis of the data, pulling that data, researching, and using that as a forecasting mechanism or using that as a starting point, right, to then build that ecosystem. And then this one that I think is so incredibly important is not just self-actualization, so understanding how you sit within the structure, but team actualization, right? The teams that you're representing and the people that you're representing, as well as the folks that you're representing them to. Exactly. Where are they at in the process? And how do you then craft a message, going back to our sales days, craft a message that helps us in our efforts, but approaches who we need to influence in a way that's palatable for them. And I think that is how you drive the business. And so taking that forward with those themes and foundation, I want to lean on more of culture. So looking at the culture, can you maybe talk to, in your experience, some strategies that you've built that help sustain when you're creating a workplace that celebrates diversity, right? That encourages belonging and specific to our Black and Afro Latino folks as well. So can you maybe talk to some strategies on impacting culture in that space?
Absolutely. I've always said giving feedback to your organization. If you see something, say something, right? How is this going to impact the organization? Also, looking at the DEI, like your performance reviews. I've seen organizations that actually add DEI criteria within their performance reviews. So you're working on it as an ERG leader, you can get graded for that. Now that contributes to your bonus. That can contribute to, what other incentives that your organization may have. And then understanding the makeup of the company. Once you do the surveys, you're able to see the starting point to push forward. I've done focus groups with mid, senior, and lower level employees. And the reason why I separate that is because I found that employees are more candid when they don't have a supervisor in the room, right? They feel comfortable enough to disclose some of the issues that they're facing. And you want to break that glass ceiling, okay? Look at your executive leadership. How much diversity do you have in those positions? And also in your senior leadership. If you're seeing that it's only in mid to lower level, then you may want to go back to the drawing board and see what opportunities can we have so that we can have more diversity in those roles. And if you have more opportunities in those roles, how are you developing your employees? So by the time you have those opportunities, you're able to meet them where they are. I've also seen the mentorship programs. Cydia touched base on that on Tuesday's event, where she's discussing those that look like you, right? So it's okay to have allies, right? We appreciate our allies. But if you're in a mentoring program and you don't see a mentor who identifies in the same skin that you're in, I've seen in my experience that the rate of diverse employees in those, and as a mentor, as a mentee, was low because they said, we don't see anybody that we can identify with. So you want to start there with that mentor program. When I got that feedback from them, what we did was, in the short-term goal, we lowered the level of requirement on the employee level, right? But in the long-term goal and interim, we were working on having more diverse opportunities in executive and senior leadership positions.
Absolutely. That is all incredible. And I want to go back a little bit to when you initially started explaining, and you all, it may sound like I'm harping on the research aspect of it, but that is really at the root of strategy. Something that you mentioned that's so important is figuring out where you're going to be most effective, figuring out where in the organization this can sit. And so that really takes, right, being a student first, assessing the organization,
Yes.
right? Assessing who your key stakeholders are, who's making the decision, who has what we call the buying power, right?
Yes.
Who are we representing? And then from that point, right, data gathering, understanding what they need, and then figuring out at what level are we going to take this to? Because essentially, thinking you're going to build a strategy and take it all across North America in a week is just not an intentional methodology. But if you're saying, okay, the first thing that I want to attach is the retention of years 1 through 3 that come into our organization. There's no development, there's no learning, there's no representation. To your point, mentoring programs. Let me then build out a strategy that focuses here, starts here, but then when we talk about ecosystem, can amplify to a lot of different areas. And so it's oftentimes, you all, that we are not able to solve all the world's problems. We're not able to solve all the firm's problems, nor should that be your methodology, because it's inefficient and it'll lead to burnout. Find where you're going to be most impactful. That starts with analysis, that starts with building a foundation of strategy. Engage the right voices in the conversations, not just the ones you're representing, but the ones that you need to influence. Then figure out, like Mia said, where do I go? How do I do this? Who do I engage in order to be efficient and effective versus just busy?
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now I was gonna say your voice has power, right? So you're more than just an ERG leader, because if, like, Cydia did cover, you may be a communications lead on your ERG, but you're not doing that in your full-time job, right? And so you are able to utilize those soft skills that you possess as an ERG leader and have that transition over to your full-time job, which will develop you for your next level. And so you want to take advantage of every opportunity that you're given within the organization. Now that's just for ERG leaders. Now let me speak to the powers that be, to the company heads. You carry weight. It starts from the top on down, right? Your employees can do but so much. Are they change agents? Yes, they are, but they can only do so much. You all have the tools and resources, and you have the power to implement that. And so you want to make sure that they feel appreciated. What are you doing? If there's current events happening, and let's talk about George Floyd. How many of the companies, Fortune 1000 companies, did you speak publicly on what happened with George Floyd, right? Look at the Pulse nightclub shooting. Did you speak on that? Things that affect in different demographics. Are you speaking on those current events? Because yes, you want your employees to come and show up and have, increased productivity, but they're human. Right. And so these events can take a toll mentally on them. So what are you doing to protect the mental well-being of your employees and making sure that they feel appreciated, so that not only can their productivity increase, but your economic stance is increasing. And then when you do that, your customers will see it. The money is going to come because your customers will see how much you are invested when it comes internally with diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. You mentioned something that is so often forgot on this ERG leadership engagement and people journey, is the personal development that comes through with this. So you may be building out strategy, you may be implementing strategy or figuring out where you start, but ultimately from start to finish, you should have developed in that process. You should have a toolkit in that process. You should have some resources in that process that you build. And so when we approach it from that standpoint, I'm helping someone else, I'm helping my community, I'm also helping myself, which is incredibly important. And that's not something that we forget. I want to roll back on something that you said as well. Your voice carries and your voice matters. And oftentimes, even today, there are occasions where you are the only one in the room, and you could potentially be the only one in the room. And you may be representing a community that you are the only representation for. So with that understanding, my voice matters, my strategy matters. I'm getting development out of this, right? So we start looking holistically at that ecosystem again. And I just wanted to double back on the importance of that voice, because oftentimes we are waiting, right, for someone to work on our behalf, to speak on our behalf. But there are circumstances where you are that someone, at least initially. and understanding that it's just not all sacrifice. It's not all sacrifice, that there is benefit and development on the other side of strategy and engagement, and on the other side of the nose. I laugh all day. I've been thinking, like, you close the door, I'm jumping out the window, right? Or I'm coming through the garage. We're going to figure it out. That is truly how we are navigating, especially now, right? And the climate that we're in, and the rollback of a lot of diversity initiatives that we're seeing and commitment. Now is the time to continue to engage our team members, our ERGs, and really sink our teeth into the why and the development of it all. So I love that specific thing. You mentioned, and we talked about ecosystem as well. How do we impact leadership? And so I want to talk through some effective collaboration strategies that you may have when we are collaborating with leadership or other departments to ensure that it leads to a meaningful outcome. It leads to a diverse culture. So can you maybe talk to some strategies that have worked or maybe not worked for you?
Yes. So I was working at an organization where the disabilities ERG, they saw that there was not a lot of accessibility offerings for their customers, right? And so what I did was I connected them with HR, I connected them with the legal team, and we went through the correspondence that we had, which did not provide accessibility offerings. And with partnering with them, we were able to see, okay, what changes can we make in this correspondence, and also do a survey to our customer base to get their perspective on that, on what we were updating on that, on those documents, or if it was the systems going online, is it accessibility friendly if they have to use a different software to accomplish whatever they're accomplishing business wise. Another organization, our Veterans ERG, I worked with them where they wanted to, they saw that a lot of the servicemen were transitioning into the civilian life. So we implemented a program where they were able to be given the soft skills. If you were about 6 months out from retiring, there was a program that got you prepared for the civilian life with that organization. And after you complete that program, when you retire, you're able to step into that role at the position. With the Black ERG at one organization, they saw there was a lack of opportunities in senior level roles, but they saw this because they saw that there was a lack of recruitment at HBCUs. This also goes for HSIs, right? And so what they did was we were able to tap into the network, and they were able to go recruit at these HBCUs and HSIs to bring in more diverse candidates into their workforce. And that was them working with the recruitment team.
Absolutely. I'm taking notes personally here because I think it's just so good. I'm getting full. Like my mom used to say when we were having a good conversation at church, I'm full.
Yeah.
I'm getting
we at a buffet today, Adonis. We are at a buffet.
We are at a buffet. The table is spread. I'm eating all day long. Like it's a vibe. But you mentioned, and this is so incredibly important when you're building strategy. And one thing that we do here at Accenture is we have to seek out executive sponsors. And that executive sponsor, now that discovery, again, going back to research, may take some time, but seeking out an executive sponsor that has an appetite to either be an ally in action or represents that community, but is in a decision maker seat, that impact is often overlooked. Right? Because when we're in an ERG, we're leading that, we have day jobs, they're more of a +1 for a lot of us, but there's management in that process. We can work ourselves and work a strategy to death. We can build out a good strategy and good impact, but with no buying power.
Yes.
And no elevation or amplification. So when we talk about liaising with leadership and building that piece of it, seeking out an executive sponsor will be key. To ensuring that your initiatives are moving forward, because our managing directors, senior managing directors, VPs and above, they have a certain level of rapport across the board to where they can build or bring their community in on the journey that transparently I just don't have visibility to, nor do I have that access to in the role. And so we talked about having the common goal. We talked about establishing the business benefit with leadership or with other groups, collaboration, intersectionality, who is doing it right or who has done it, and joining in and collaborating. We don't always have to recreate the wheel in strategy, figuring out with intentional discovery what's happening and how those folks are being engaged so that we can build, to your point, mentorship programs, hiring initiatives, efforts within the HBCU, HSI pipeline, things that have started because we do have connectivity, but not losing sight of executives want to hear, leadership want to hear the impact to business.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always a business case. There's always a business case to why we engage our folks, why we operate in the parameter of diversity, and why this is so incredibly important. Taking it back, our clients are expecting us to be that space. Our clients are expecting us to look like them. Our marketing messaging is going out globally, and there's not one person of color or one person in those communities working with that messaging. That's a problem, right? And so when you have those connections intentional, it helps you build out strategy, problem discovery, having that executive sponsor. So I love that piece of it, especially when we talk about collaborating within the organization.
Yes, executive sponsors are powerful, right? I make it a point for all of my ERGs to have 2 executive sponsors, because with me being overseeing the executive working group, the committee, you want to make sure the executive sponsor committee, my apologies, you want to make sure that if one exec sponsor can attend, the other one is able to attend, because let's be real, they're very busy, right? They may be inundated with work. You don't know what's happening on their end. So you want to make sure you still have the representation. Your exec sponsors are your eyes and ears in those rooms, in those board rooms, the senior level rooms. They are your advocates. And you want to make sure that whoever you select for your exec sponsor has your best interest at heart. But also, and on the same token, you want to make sure that you have a open mind, right? That you're at a point where you can receive that feedback from your exec sponsor, because they're going to come to you with the business line, right? Well, how is this a business case? How is this going to make us money? You want to be able to, so don't be disgruntled, don't be angry if they give you a no. That just means you got to go out the window. Okay. They didn't tell you no, absolutely not. Just no right now for this initiative. You have to find a workaround, but that's where you work with your exec sponsors. Oftentimes in these leadership positions, remember, I go back to saying, when you're often, high up in your role, sometimes you lose sight of what mid to lower level employees are facing, especially if you're in a customer facing role. You're on the front lines. You're hearing the feedback from your employees, or you may be in the break room and you hear something that your teammate is saying, like, why don't we have this? Or how can we incorporate this? You're taking that knowledge, that feedback, the insight back to your executive sponsors and say, this was a seed that was planted. How can we let it flourish, right, into a tree? And we can bring this into the executives or to the CEO or whoever may be in those rooms to make that change happen. And if that change cannot happen, how I bring it to you, okay, what's a workaround? What can we pivot to in order to make sure that this is accomplished for our organization?
That piece of it, the okay and, is so important as well in this space. We're talking about really, and all of this is rooted in, again, nurturing the growth and inclusion of our ERGs, Black and Afro Latino ERGs, and population. But that okay and is so incredibly important. You can't do this, okay and, right? You as my executive sponsor, you as my leadership, we can't do this, okay and what is the next piece of it? And so going back to the foundation of building that strategy to engage our folks, be prepared for the okay and be prepared to drive that conversation forward, especially when you're looking to build intentional connection. When you're looking to build and start something even new, right? Yeah. Shake the table a little bit. That preparation intention is so incredibly important.
Exactly. And you touched on it earlier about intersectionality. That is important, right? ERGs, like I said, I'm over 12 ERGs, and I make sure that they collaborate with one another oftentimes as they can, right? I say that the Hispanic ERG, you're not just a Hispanic Heritage Month ERG. The Black ERG, you are not just a Black History Month ERG. You make an impact 365 or 2024, 366 days a year, right? And how are you helping to impact and bring that change to your organization? And you want to make sure that you're hearing the different perspectives. So it may be an event and you say, well, let's do a collaborative event. There may be Afro Latina and who's also mixed with, Black or Afro Latina and also a woman. Okay, now you have the Hispanic Latin ERG, the Black ERG, and the women's ERG. You all can collaboratively host an event and bring this awareness to your organization and make a greater impact, right? Also, is the majority of your workforce, are they hybrid? Are they just virtually, or are they in person? Okay, how can we make a greater impact? Do we want to just have it an online event? or do we want to have online and in person at different locations? So you want to make sure that you're speaking to your other ERGs to get the perspective of what they're facing. In the past, I've had the Black ERG and the Native American ERG. They have collaborated together because, historically, a lot of African Americans have Native American roots, right? And so a lot of people may not know that. Okay, so what is your ancestry? What are you looking at? And how has that contributed to who you are today? How can you bring awareness about these different demographics, and that it's not just a Black ERG, a disabilities ERG, Hispanic ERG. You're not just in a box. A lot of times you're mixed with several different demographics that make you who you are, make you so unique. And a lot of, especially our allies, may not know that unless you let them know, unless you bring that awareness to them.
Absolutely. That uniqueness and that oneness, right, allows you an opportunity to then elevate. And we talked about that development. I'm going to take a little turn here, Mia. I know we cannot solve the world's problems, but as we were alluding before in our process, there are systemic and systematic structures and things and policies and process in place that kind of bar us and block us from being able to push some of these initiatives, to grow, to have that representation. I'm thankful that we've seen such growth. We've seen such development, but that's not always the case, especially when you're looking to build out strategies. And so for you, what actionable steps were you able to put into place? What action items and strategies were you able to put in place to address some of those systemic and systematic barriers, even some of the experiences that you had in your previous career previously in your career that you shared with us? What are some of those strategies that you've utilized, and how do we kind of address that and some unconscious bias that may hinder the growth of our populations within corporations?
Okay. Yeah. So within my career, I have worked with the Employee Assistance Program. So looking at the different resources or the therapeutic options that your organization provides to its workforce. If there are certain current events that are happening, are there opportunities for your workforce to just sit there and speak candidly as how this is affecting you? I've also worked with the speechwriter for CEOs to add that within their, if it's a town hall, to speak on the current events, or if there's an email. I've had CEOs send an email out with certain current events that have taken place to address the workforce, and also providing the resources that are available to them if they need an outlet. Your ERGs, you all are a safe space, right? So it may come to you all having an emergency meeting to just say, let's just talk. Let's have a coffee chat. Let's have a fireside chat, right? How are you feeling today? And just give them the opportunity, give them the floor to speak candidly. But I always say it's okay to be vocal and to vent, right? But I always say, what now? You always want to walk away from that meeting with an action item as to how you're going to assist with this issue that was discussed in that meeting. What are you all doing? Let's give some perspective, or give some options. Let's do a list of options and give that feedback to our executive sponsor to take this to the leadership team. And then you also can have speakers. I've had speakers come in and address certain issues that have taken place, and also given the workforce the tools and resources that are needed in order to overcome these challenges that are happening.
Absolutely. That is so important. And this is just the rotation of relationship building and being intentional and having strategy and studying your organization or your firm or your company to see what structures are in place. Going back to that data gathering, we're going to harp on that. Understanding where your firm is on that journey, where you can have impact. Some things that we were able to do in my previous life, I oversaw recruiting, but it was kind of a melting pot, as you saw years ago, where it was recruiting and then a little bit of diversity and a little bit of HRBP in there. And then you got a little bit of all of this stuff. So I was handling everything. But with the discovery of the program, I realized that there was no advocacy and there was no sponsorship happening in the process that could bring parity or equity, right? And we saw that traditionally cis white men were progressing and advancing because they had the advocacy of likeness.
Yes.
And we were able to prove that business case. So as an ERG, we got together and we said, okay, here's the use case. We then built our ecosystem to attach ourselves to HR or recruiting to kind of talk through some of the programs and the strategies that we had into play. From there, they realized, actually, we do have a gap. And it's great that you revealed that. Let us set up, or can you help us set up what we had called the advocacy and sponsorship program? And so all of our executives were tasked with sponsoring talent within the organization and getting that amplification within the firm. And that was an equity thing because they were already doing that, right, with their likeness, but making sure that we were amplifying and creating career journeys. Another thing that we were able to do was when everybody was really bought in, and to this point bought into diversity, they were bought into diversity at thought, but they weren't really owning it and leaning into it. And so the ERGs did a survey. We went to some of our executive leaders. We talked to them about diversity. We had them created a safe space for them to talk to us. We did some data gathering and some data research, and we realized that these particular folks are impacted by profitability. They're impacted by dollars and cents, and they're impacted by top line and bottom line growth. We got that anecdotal information. We partnered that with our HR information that we had from sponsorship and all of those things together. We went to our VP of HR, and because there was an appetite for advancement and diversity, she said, we have a solve for that. And so essentially, because we knew that we could anchor our diversity goals and inch closer to that from a retention standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, we had to hit them in the pocket.
Yes.
So she was able to say, okay, it may be a small percentage at first, maybe 5%, 3%, 6%, but that particular point of your bonus is contingent on the sense of belonging, retention, and diversity on your team.
Exactly.
So we were able to use the content of the ERG with the data that we had gathered and the research that we had, used our ecosystem that we talked about with HR and get them bought into the process, and then present a use case that ended up impacting how our top level, our senior leaders, our leadership were being evaluated based on their team. And so when we talk about systemic and systematic structures, it could be as simple as recognizing what the issue is, and again, understanding where the appetite is, right? And who that key stakeholder person could be, and using that to leverage change. We can't solve all the world's problems. There's just no way that we can do that, but we can hold people accountable to do what's right, and not just what's right for our people, but what's right for the business.
Exactly. Yes, that's important. That appreciation is important. With ERGs being grassroots, you don't want to turn a blind eye that this is a volunteer role for them. But you also want to make sure that, okay, if maybe your company may not have the budget to finance them, monetarily to give them that incentive for being on an ERG leadership role, but what are the non-monetary incentives that you can provide to them to make them feel appreciated, whether it's ERG leader night, right? Or whether it's, we're going to send you to a certification, or you can go to an escape room and do a team building exercise. Or if it's giving you all a budget, giving the ERGs a budget, let's put the money behind our support, right? Put our money where our mouth is, and be able to assist them with helping any of the initiatives that they want to implement within the organization. I found that having a budget, a lot of ERG leaders say, wow, they are serious about supporting us. And then having companies have someone like myself, an ERG leader, manager, ERG manager, to come in and be able to give that formality, get everything set in stone and help them through this process. It can be scary, especially if you haven't been in a leadership role position before. You may need assistance. So have someone that's going to hold your hand. If it's, going through different systems, such as, if you want to have a analytical system that you all can use for your ERGs to say, okay, how do we track that quantitative analysis, right? Okay, if we're having events, how are you all surveying that? I always have my ERGs do pre and post event surveys, because you want to know where you're starting from and where you're ending. You want to hear the feedback that your attendees are saying. This also gives you opportunity to say, okay, this is the feedback they're saying, but what other events would you like to see come out of this ERG? What other initiatives would you like to see come out of this ERG? You also have programs such as Diverge that Sadia covered the other day. That's an ERG training program. So you don't be afraid to utilize the resources out there. There's several consulting firms that you all could work with to give you that insight on how to make your ERG successful, but also give insight to your organization on how they can equip you with the tools needed for you all to be successful.
Absolutely, 100% kind of aligned. And I do want to address the second part of that, Mia, where we talk about unconscious bias or we talk about bias. Some of those things are, and I'm hopeful that you will agree, some of those things are out of our control in terms of uh, controlling whether unconscious bias is in the process. But what's not out of our control is the preventative aspect, is the training aspect. And so going back to understanding your organization, the first thing I did when I joined Accenture, I've been at Accenture about 2 years. The first thing I did was I became a student, right? As I mentioned before, do we do unconscious bias training? Is it a requirement for our recruiting team? And is it a requirement for our leaders and our people? And then I leaned into I leaned into L&D, learning and development, and I asked, what programs and development and training programs do you have for leadership, and do you have for people that come through the organization? That's open knowledge. It's not behind a paywall. You can often search that internally. But when we were able to find that unconscious bias is taught, but you can have an extra opportunity to get in front of leadership, we took it. At my former company, we utilized our ERGs to say, okay, you've got supplemental learning and development for unconscious bias, but twice a year, we're going to do a refresher. So we would love to invite senior leadership into an unconscious bias call led by the ERGs, specifically talking through how this may show up. And though it started with incremental growth because it wasn't a requirement, they already did the training. At the end of that year or after a few years, we had full participation, about 95% adoption across the organization, but it became an expected requirement of the business that the ERGs now will help us own some of that strategy. And so unconscious bias is often, I'll mention it again, something that we cannot control.
Exactly.
We can control the preventative efforts as well as the training and development efforts that we provide or can seek to provide our firms and our organizations.
Absolutely.
So to pivot, I got one final question. One final question before we look to take
one question.
just one before we take some questions from the audience, see what's going on there. But I wanna lean on maybe a success story or some best practices that you may have experienced that have effectively nurtured the growth and inclusivity for Black and Latino ERGs, Afro Latino ERGs.
Yes. Like I said, it starts from the top, right? So that executive support, that public executive support. It's okay to be in the C-suite and you're speaking amongst your colleagues, but we want you to come out to the front lines and speak to your workforce. Don't be ashamed to, shake hands and kiss babies, like what they like to say, right? You want to make sure that you're hearing from them and that you're in a position to receive the feedback that they're going to give you. Budgets, right? I've worked at organizations where the budget can range from 3,000 up to 10,000 per ERG. When the organizations, when the ERGs see that you all or companies back them financially and invest in them, it's an investment because the investment is going to pay off. That's that ROI, right? That's going to pay off when they feel like, okay, they have confidence in us, so we want to have more confidence in ourselves. And what can we do to think outside the box? It's not just about bringing a speaker in. What other avenues can you take to make an impact that your ERG can make an impact to your organization? We've seen on the intranet site, right? They've had ERG pages for each ERG where they're able to share, this is our leadership team. This is our culture. These are the events coming out with our ERGs, but not just on the intranet, on the external website. What is the culture of your organization? That will make customers gravitate towards your company. It will make candidates gravitate towards your company because, again, you're going to get them through the door, but are you going to keep them? That retention is key. So you want to make sure that they understand the culture that they're coming into. And that's going to make them want to join you all. And then also promotions. I think that looking at your senior executive leadership positions and doing things that you can make sure that you're equipping your workforce to get to those positions. But you want to also survey, it may just not be executive, if it's a senior leadership role, survey the external diversity of your workforce. If you're seeing a low number of your Afro Latina demographic or teammates, you want to make sure that you have avenues to make sure that they can be successful in these positions or be promoted to these positions. It's okay to get that number, but also you want to find out, okay, if we had all of these vacancies, but we had to continue to hire externally, or we were hiring white females or white males, why is that? Why did they have the resources in order to be equipped in that position in order for them to step into that role? That will also take you incorporating your training and development team, having them assess what's happening. Consultants, don't be afraid to go outside of your organization and get consultants. Have a diverse perspective, because oftentimes when you're an outside looking in, you're able to be a neutral party and see some of the gaps that are happening within your organization, and they're there to help fill these positions, fill these gaps for you. And then the non-monetary benefits, the budget, if not just budget, but the non-monetary incentives, such as certification courses. I've had ERGs send some of their members to certifications, and they were able to use their budget. I also had some ERGs that opted to pay 3 to 5 of their members' professional organization member dues in order to show them that we're investing in you as well. And I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I've also seen newsletters. So our ERGs, they've done collaborative newsletters where they're highlighting the different events that's taking place. Or if they don't want to just do a collaborative newsletter, the company has a newsletter, right? So what they've done is they've had an ERG corner where all the upcoming events are happening, or if the ERGs opt to say, we want to talk about a specific topic that's applicable, not just something that's challenging, but something that's accomplishment within the community. They may say, hey, we had such and such event last week. This is the overview of how the event went, some of the numbers, and this is what we learned from it. Or also giving resources to say, we're investing in ourselves, but our other teammates, we want to invest in you too. So here's some resources, here's some articles that you can read up on as an ally, as an advocate, to understand the challenges that may be facing within our demographic and what you can do to assist, right? You want to pay it forward. So how can you equip your allies and advocates to be that resource for you?
Y'all better get in here. Mia said, I provided. Come on and eat. Come on and eat and get in here. I'm pulling themes from what you said, Mia, as I mentioned before. And we want to start with intention, right? When we talk about successes, all of your successful examples started with intention. They started with that aspect. They continued with consistency, is what I'm hearing. Frequency. It continued with getting frequent touch points and touch bases and accountability and getting in front of the faces. So it creates a culture of a normal expectation, right? That frequency. Also, something that you mentioned that was a light bulb to me is considering multiple avenues and considering multiple ways to engage. And it may be, again, figuring out where that is within the organization and attacking that from a lot of different areas. Is it a newsletter? Is it a monthly readout? Is it an annual connect? Can we do a launch to recruiting season or a launch to fiscal year? We do all these town halls. Can we get time on the town hall? So it's moving with intention, consistency, frequent and multiple avenues, and that attached with benefits, both non-monetary and monetary benefits, lead you to success or can potentially be the foundation for what we deem as a successful outcome.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Looks like we have a question for you, Adonis.
Let me see.
Someone asked, what has been your biggest challenge and most notable benefit of navigating multiple identity spaces and therefore multiple ERG communities?
Well, first, the biggest challenge was coming to terms that I can be all of these things at once. I think when I entered my career many years ago, when I entered my career, I was leaning on the parameter of diversity that was so obvious, and that was my skin color. I can't get away from being Black. It's just who I am, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was using that and only operating in that lens because that's what people saw first. And even over the last decade, our minds weren't that intuitive back then to diversity and intersectionality from a corporate standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, the challenge was coming to the realization with the utilization of ERGs, with the utilization of mentors, that I can be all of these things, right? I can be Black, I can identify as gay, I can be a millennial, I can do all of these things, right? Mm-hmm. And be successful, and I don't have to pick and choose, right? What that is. And I think that's so incredibly important as we're navigating organizations and we talk about intersectionality. I don't have to pick where that is, meaning I can be impactful in a lot of different spaces. But what that did provide me, right, and the benefit to that, though there were some challenges, the benefit to that is I'm able to speak the language, quote unquote, identify in the opportunities and the scenarios and represent multiple parameters of diversity. And so when we talk about being the only one or having to be that one that stood up and said it, it was me. Hey, it's me. I represent all of these things and I am all of these things. And though that is a challenge for me and a challenge for you, we're going to get it right. And I'm representing these communities that come behind me. And so the challenge was first started with me, right? Setting my own expectation, understanding who I was, doing a bit of self-actualization for myself, because I have a thought and a theory that I can't be impactful, I can't be engaging, I can't engage, I can't produce my best work if I haven't first settled on how I need to show up to be successful, what I need. And I was feeding the ethnicity side of me, but that LGBTQ side, that generational side was lacking. Yes. Right. And so then it created a whole dystopia, right, for that piece of it. And so that was the biggest challenge for me. And now, looking back all those years later, now I'm able to firmly stand in the fact that intersectionality is incredibly important. And it's not going away. And we must allow our workforce, we must allow our people to be all that they are. Exactly. In the way that is most efficient and most effective to them. And everyone operates in a parameter of intersectionality. Everyone does. Whether you lean into it or not is up to you. But I have a belief, as I'll say one more time, I can't present my best work if I'm not my best self. Exactly. Or the self that I need to show up. So that's the journey, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it. I love that journey. Because like I said, I know what it's like to be unseen and voiceless, right? And it's that the imposter syndrome will have a way of seeping through to say, hey, you just tap you on the shoulder and say, you don't belong here. What's wrong with you? You're not supposed to be at this table. Oh, no, baby, I'm going to grab a seat from this back of the room and I'm going to drag it onto this table and sit right here.
Okay.
I'm going to collaborate. That's what I'm going to do because I am enough, right? You are enough. Right. And it's a reason why you're in this position. It's a reason why you're at this table and you contribute something. Right. So don't let anyone or anybody tell you that you are not good enough because the company is only as great as its employees. OK, and you always carry that with you. You know, I'm not going to preach today on this good old
listen. Can we the doors of the church are open. Okay. They are open because I just had this conversation and it's so timely. I told my leadership, and this is a moment of transparency for everyone on the call. I told my leadership, if I'm waiting for you to give me permission or I'm waiting for you to tell me who I am, I've already lost the battle. I've already lost the fight. I've already lost the career because as ERG members, as people of color, as people that operate in a lot of different parameters of diversity, my expectation is that we're not waiting for you to tell us who we are or waiting for you to give us that, okay, go ahead, be who you are. But we're coming to the table self-actualized. We're coming to the table confident and comfortable with the resources and the community that we have. That's why ERGs are also so important. I was a baby once, right? A baby in my career. And there were folks that rallied beside me in those ERGs that reminded me, right, that it's okay to be who you are, but you have to know who you are first. These corporations and these companies aren't going to tell you that piece of it. So we're going to stand flat-footed and I'm full.
Okay.
I'm full everybody else.
And I have validated myself. Adonis, you have validated you. Everyone on this call, you have validated yourselves. And guess what? We are enough.
That part. Okay? Mia, we gonna wrap up here. We're right on time. I want to finish off with some final thoughts. Any final thoughts for you wrapping up our session as we talked about engaging our people, our ERGs? Any final thoughts here?
Yes. Don't worry about just developing everyone else. Start with developing yourself. And when you have developed yourself to have that strong foundation, you will make an impact. Your voice is powerful. Your voice carries weight. And oftentimes people just don't know. So it's our job to share with them. I don't fault you for not knowing. I fault you for knowing and choosing not to take heed, not to be educated and knowledgeable once you have the information. So all together, we're going to make an impact. We have it. And what about you, Adonis?
You know, I will leave just a few words. Be intentional. Be mindful, be present, and really lean into that. I think oftentimes we look at the big picture and it becomes super daunting, but look at how to be strategic. and look at the areas that you can impact. We spend so much time thinking about what we can't do and what we don't have and what's working against us, which is important. What do we have? What can we do? And where can we do it? That will help drive incremental growth. Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Work to be efficient. Yes, work to be efficient and not just busy, right? And lean on being impactful. I think that is incredibly important. But those are my final words. Those are our final words. We are so excited. I know I'm sad that this conversation is so I know I am emotional, but everyone on the call, thank you for your time. Mia, thank you for your time. And stay engaged, folks, with Alpha. There's so much content coming. So if you're not already following Alpha on social media platforms, please do so. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of YouTube, all of the things to stay up to date with what we have to come. But Mia, that is our time.
Bye, virtual world.
Bye, friends. Bye, friends.